Sit back and enjoy 2 hours of fascinating facts you didn't know. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Let's get started. The human body has approximately 37 trillion cells. Each one is microscopic, but it contains DNA with enough genetic information to fill around 1,000 books of 600 pages if it were written in detail. Together, the DNA from all the cells in the body stretched out would reach astronomical distances, showing how incredibly compact genetic information is stored. A newborn giant panda weighs the same as a teacup. At birth, it measures only a few inches and is completely pink, blind, and without the characteristic black and white fur. During the first weeks, it depends entirely on its mother to survive. A common ballpoint pen can write 45,000 words before running out. The ink usually lasts long enough to draw several miles of continuous line, depending on the model. This type of pen uses a small metal ball at the tip that distributes the ink evenly as it moves over the paper. The famous mushrooms that Mario eats are based on a mushroom called Amanita muscaria. People who have eaten them in real life claim that they caused a sensation of feeling larger than normal. This red mushroom with white spots is one of the most recognizable in the world and frequently appears in illustrations and stories. However, it is also toxic and can cause hallucinations, nausea, and disorientation if consumed. According to dermatologists, daily showers can cause dry and irritated skin, and technically, humans should only shower every 2 or 3 days in warm water. That is a bit gross. I like my daily showers. At the beginning of 2015, an extreme cold wave caused parts of Niagara Falls to partially freeze, creating an uncommon spectacle. Although it is not the first time this has happened, the conditions required are so specific that it remains a rare and very striking phenomenon for those who witness it. Human evolution has favored the brain over strength, which means that as we become smarter, our muscles actually become weaker. Compared to other primates, humans have less relative muscle mass and lower density of fibers intended for explosive strength, but in return developed greater endurance and energy efficiency. This allowed more resources to be devoted to brain development, which consumes a large amount of energy even at rest. There are white strawberries with red seeds in Japan called First Love Aroma. They are incredibly sweet and rich, but also ridiculously expensive, costing around $4.10 each. Alpacas can get sick or even die from loneliness, so it is always best to keep them in pairs or groups. They are highly social animals that rely on the group to feel safe, reduce stress, and maintain natural behaviors, which is why many countries legally recommend not raising them alone to ensure their well-being. According to astronomers at the National University of Australia, there are 10 times more stars in the night sky than grains of sand in the deserts and beaches of the world. This calculation is based on estimates of hundreds of billions of observable galaxies, each with billions of stars, and continues to be refined with new space telescopes that expand our knowledge of the universe. There are small holes or pores in chicken eggs and in those of other birds that allow the chicks to breathe oxygen and release carbon dioxide. A chicken egg has more than 7,000 pores. These pores also regulate internal humidity and help prevent the buildup of bacteria, while a thin protective layer on the shell controls gas exchange without compromising the safety of the embryo during its development. The vampire fish impales its prey with its long, sharp fangs. Its fangs can grow up to 6 inches long. Also known as payata, it lives in rivers of South America and has teeth so long that they fit into special cavities in its skull, which allows it to close its mouth without injuring itself while stalking other fish in fast-moving waters. The peacock spider performs a small mating dance to attract a partner. Each type of peacock spider has its own style of dance. Males raise their legs and display a fan of bright colors on their abdomen, combining rhythmic movements with vibrations to catch the female's attention, who is usually very selective before accepting courtship. 5,500 confirmed exoplanets have been discovered by telescope. Most have been detected by missions such as Kepler and TESS, using the transit method, where the slight dimming of a star's light is observed when a planet passes in front of it. Some of these worlds are inhabitable zones and present characteristics as diverse as gas giants or rocky planets similar to Earth. An ostrich egg contains more than 2,000 calories and can take up to 2 hours to cook. But even though they are the largest eggs in the world, when compared to the size of the bird, they could be considered small. Compared to body size, the largest egg belongs to the kiwi, which can weigh up to 25% of its body mass. In comparison, if humans were like kiwis, a 132-pound person would lay a 33-pound egg. But fortunately, we are not kiwis. The first living beings that orbited space and successfully returned safely to planet Earth were 40 mice, 2 rats, 1 rabbit, flies, plants, and 2 dogs. They were aboard the Soviet capsule Sputnik 5, which was launched in August 1960. Classic tube televisions confirm the Big Bang Theory. On channels with no signal, there is a noise called static, and 1% of that noise comes from cosmic microwave background radiation. It is cosmic light, or photons, from 13,800,000,000 years ago that originated with the Big Bang and are still in transit. The soccer team with the longest and most confusing name in the world is the Llanfair Pwth Gwyngyll Gogerechwyn Drobl Llan Tysilio Goch Football Club, founded in 1899. It plays in the 4th division of Welsh soccer and is named after the town of the same name where they play. To avoid saying the full name, they use the abbreviated version, Llanfair Pwth FC. The White House physician, Admiral Joel T. Boone, invented a game called Hoover Ball for President Hoover. It was a combination of tennis, volleyball, and a medicine ball, created to help keep President Hoover in good physical shape. A British woman named Dorothy Eady claimed that after recovering from an injury at 3 years of age, she began to have memories of a past life in ancient Egypt, where she had been a priestess and servant in the court of Pharaoh Seti I. This motivated her to move to Egypt and have a prolific career as an Egyptologist. Blue jays and cardinals go bald in late summer and in the fall. They usually lose all their feathers and replace them gradually when they molt, but sometimes they lose them all at once, creating a bald head. However, they are only bald for about 1 week, and their feathers grow back. Although the Church of Scientology has been in Germany since 1970, the German government does not recognize it as a religion and instead views it as an abusive business posing as a religion. Authorities have even conducted surveillance through constitutional protection agencies during certain periods, citing concerns about internal practices and potential conflicts with democratic principles. Texas A&M University once conducted a study where participants were asked to taste wines labeled as France, California, and Texas. Although most people said the French wine was the best, all of them were actually the exact same Texan wine. It was reported that the budget to produce the final season of the series, Stranger Things, was more than $480 million for the 8 episodes. If the minimum combined budgets of all 5 seasons are added together, the series cost a total of nearly $900 million in production, without including marketing costs. Its cost places it only behind The Rings of Power among the most expensive. The airplane that crashed in the movie The Dark Knight Rises, with the use of computer-generated special effects, actually crashed the following year, killing 2 people on board. According to a study conducted by the University of Oxford, men need to have at least 2 boys' nights per week to stay healthy. This idea relates to research on social bonds and well-being, suggesting that maintaining close friendships can reduce stress and improve mental health. In Neuschwanstein Castle in Bavaria, Germany, there is an artificial cave with fake stalactites illuminated in a theatrical way. It was part of the whims of King Ludwig II, who ordered this castle to be built in the 19th century, which later served as inspiration for the Disney castle. The 10 documented people who have lived the longest are all women. Each ranges between 116 and 122 years of age, and they remained active until the end. The longest lived recorded is Jean Calment, who reached 122 years. Many verified cases come from Europe and Japan, and they tend to share simple routines, close family networks, and consistent habits rather than strict diets or extraordinary secrets. The most powerful controlled sound created by humans is the low-frequency military sonar system of submarines, which serves as a radar underwater. It can reach 215 decibels. Because sound waves travel differently in water than in air, the figures cannot be compared. But this noise often disorients whales and other animals that depend on sound to avoid getting lost. The strongest insect in the world is the dung beetle. It can pull 1,141 times its own body weight. That would be like an average person pulling 6 double-decker buses full of people. This record belongs to the species Onthophagus taurus, where males use that strength to compete and secure food, forming balls of dung that also serve as shelter and a reserve for their offspring. In Australia, there is a stinging shrub known as gimpy gimpy. Touching it releases a powerful neurotoxin, but its fruit is edible if the spines are removed. The plant belongs to the genus Dendrocnide and is considered one of the most painful in the world. Even light contact can cause intense sensations that persist for days or weeks, so handling requires extreme caution. Vantablack is known as the blackest black material, capable of absorbing 99.965% of visible light, and looking at it is like staring into an abyss. It is made of millions of vertically aligned carbon nanotubes that trap light inside, preventing it from reflecting to the human eye. Due to its extreme absorption capacity, it has been used in scientific applications such as telescopes and optical equipment, where it helps reduce unwanted reflections and improve measurement accuracy. The largest KFC restaurant in the world is in the city of Baku in Azerbaijan, inside a train station built in 1926, part of a Soviet Union railway network. Before becoming the restaurant, the building was abandoned, and KFC invested €3 million in its restoration. The word emoji is the Japanese term for picture characters. Emojis were actually born out of necessity back in 1999, when mobile operators struggled to meet the messaging needs of 80 million users of a rapidly growing cell phone technology, and their hope was that an emoji would reduce the need for multiple text messages or even picture messages. The longest literary work ever written is a fan fiction based on the series Loud House that has 2,328 chapters with a total of more than 32 million words. For reference, the 7 Harry Potter books total just over 1 million words. This fanfic includes characters such as Peter Griffin, Naruto, Galactus, Bowser, and thousands more. It is so long because the author included, among other things, complete wiki articles as character descriptions. The fin whale produces an average of 257 gallons of urine each day. That is a lot of urine. This enormous volume helps recycle nutrients in the ocean, especially iron, which supports the growth of phytoplankton. The species, known scientifically as Balanoptera physalis, is the second largest animal on the planet and plays a key role in the balance of marine ecosystems. In 2013, Mark Zuckerberg spent $30 million buying 4 houses surrounding his home just to ensure privacy. The purchase was made in the Palo Alto area, where he sought to prevent nearby developments from compromising the tranquility of his surroundings. 74% of Japanese households have high-tech toilets, which eliminate the need for toilet paper and feature seat heating, self-cleaning, and deodorant spraying. Many units also include control panels with multiple functions, water-saving systems, and privacy modes that emit sound to mask noise. These innovations are part of a culture that prioritizes hygiene and comfort, and have become a standard in homes and public spaces. In 1999, NASA lost a $125 million probe that was orbiting the planet Mars due to a metric system confusion. One part of the mission staff was using pound force to measure thrust, while the navigation software expected data in pound force. Because of this, the spacecraft entered too low into the Martian atmosphere and disintegrated. Elephant Island, located off the coast of Antarctica, has elephant moss growing on it that is more than 5,500 years old. This type of moss can survive extreme cold and dryness, growing only about 0.04 inches per year, which allows some colonies to remain alive for millennia and act as natural records of the region's ancient climate. To date, it is estimated that LEGO has produced more than 1 trillion pieces worldwide. That is equivalent to more than 100 pieces for every person on the planet, a figure that reflects not only its enormous popularity, but also the global reach of this iconic toy over decades. Daniel Radcliffe celebrated winning the role of Harry Potter by staying up an extra half-hour past his bedtime to watch Fawlty Towers. What a party animal. At that time, he was just a child and had a pretty strict routine, so that little sleepless celebration was his way of marking the news. Among the countries that have many more men than women are the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, India, China, and Qatar, while among those that have more women than men are Russia, Lithuania, Hong Kong, the Bahamas, and Belarus. The main reasons for these imbalances are labor migration, gender preference before birth, and life expectancy. Cheesemaking artists at the Science Gallery in Dublin made cheese using bacteria from various artists and scientists that were collected with sterile cotton swabs from different parts of their bodies, including a belly button, a mouth, and even tears. In 1993, a lawyer named Gary Hoy in Toronto wanted to demonstrate to a group of law students the resistance of his office windows, performing a practical demonstration. Although the glass withstood the impact, the frame structure unexpectedly gave way, resulting in a tragic outcome. Traffic flow in Google Maps is actually a real-time visualization of the number of Android phones currently making the trip you are looking at. The system combines anonymous data from mobile devices, both Android and iOS, along with historical information and user reports to estimate traffic speed on each road. There is a giant, abandoned church in the middle of the jungle in Java, Indonesia, shaped like a chicken. Built in 1992 by a man who claimed it was inspired by a divine vision. It was built with the intention of being shaped like a dove, but everyone calls it the Chicken Church. There is a women's group called Gulabi Gang, or Pink Gang in India, that confronts abusers in the country. The group was founded in 2006 and is based in Badoza. It has the astonishing number of 400,000 members and helps bring abusers and corrupt police officers to justice. The women who join the group are registered, given a small identification card, and wear a distinctive uniform, a pink sari, and for 500 rupees per year, they also receive a stick to carry with them. The Bororo people are an indigenous group in Brazil, and everyone shares the same blood type, type O. This trait has been observed in various indigenous groups across the Americas, where genetic variation in blood types is lower, attracting scientific attention for studying migration patterns and inheritance in ancient populations. A study published shows that men who take many selfies tend to display higher levels of traits associated with narcissism and self-exposure. The research analyzed social media behavior and found that the frequency of self-photos also relates to a greater tendency to edit images before posting them. These patterns were most noticeable in profiles with high digital activity, where the need for approval and visibility influences how people construct their online image. Betty Boop first appeared in color in a short film from 1934 that was made using the two-strip Cinecolor process because Walt Disney had exclusive rights to the new three-strip Technicolor process. To take advantage of the use of color, Betty Boop's hair is red and her eyes are green, an appearance that contrasts with her classic black hair. There used to be a fifth suit of playing cards called the Eagle in the United States. These cards were green with an eagle on them instead of red or black. In England, they were blue with a royal crown symbol. Originally, they were intended to be used in the game of bridge, and they were part of an experimental deck created in the early 20th century to add greater strategic complexity, although it never became popular and remained a little-known curiosity. Beethoven began losing his hearing at only 28 years old, so he cut the legs off his piano so he could sit on the floor and compose music by feeling the instrument's vibrations. Even with this difficulty, he wrote some of his most recognized works in his later years, including the Ninth Symphony, when he could hardly hear anything. He also used conversation notebooks to communicate with those around him and continued conducting and composing until the end of his life. Our brains are like nuclear reactors in the sense that they can heat up and cool down, and if you let your brain overheat, you could literally experience a collapse. The brain depends on a very precise thermal balance to function correctly. When body temperature rises too much, as in cases of heat stroke, cognitive functions can deteriorate rapidly, affecting memory, coordination, and decision-making, and can even cause fainting or neurological damage if not controlled in time. During the filming of the two Wicked movies, the lead duo Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo insisted on singing live in every take. So the production days were especially demanding because it required repeating scenes many times while holding notes, dancing, and maintaining emotional performance. For that reason, many fans have theorized that the actresses were left with negative psychological effects. In Alaska, it is illegal to hunt a moose from an airplane. This practice, known as same-day airborne hunting, prohibits locating animals from the air and hunting them the same day to avoid unfair advantages and protect wildlife. The rule applies especially to species such as moose and seeks to maintain balance in sport hunting in remote areas of the state. Boxer and Olympic gold medalist George Foreman has 5 sons, and he named all of them George. To differentiate them, each uses a different nickname, and Foreman has explained that he did this as a way to strengthen the sense of family unity. Vikings used crows to find land by following the direction in which the crows flew, which is why it became their favorite symbol and eventually ended up on their flag. In several Norse sagas, they are described releasing birds when sailing in open seas. If the bird returned, it meant no land was nearby, but if it kept flying in one direction, it indicated possible land. This symbolism is also related to the god Odin, who had two crows named Hugin and Munin, associated with knowledge and exploration. The smallest desert in the world measures 1.00 square miles. It is called Carcross Desert and is in Yukon, Canada. Technically, it should not be a desert because its origin is not extreme aridity, but an ancient glacial lake that left the dunes. Even so, it is a unique place where sandboarding can be done in cold weather due to its proximity to the North Pole instead of being in the heat of the Sahara. Gladiators were, for the most part, vegetarians. Their diets consisted of barley and vegetables. This allowed them to gain weight to protect themselves during fights and make them appear more spectacular to the crowd. In ancient Rome, they were known as barley eaters, and they also consumed drinks rich in plant ash to recover minerals after combat, something similar to a rudimentary supplement to strengthen their bones. In many cities in China, wearing masks has become increasingly common as a measure to protect against air pollution, and it has even become a fashion statement with designer masks. Some include advanced filters and customized designs, combining functionality with style in urban environments with high pollution levels. In 2012, Italy officially made it illegal to tell a man that he has no balls because it hurts masculine pride. In reality, the case comes from a judicial ruling in which a court considered that the expression could constitute a serious insult to honor, depending on the context. In the Italian legal system, personal offenses can be sanctioned if they affect someone's dignity. The technique of glassblowing originated about 2,000 years ago in the Eastern Mediterranean, in what is now Syria. The act of inflating a bubble of molten glass using a hollow tube changed the world. It made it possible to create lightweight containers in large quantities. Soon after, it was adopted in the Roman Empire, where so many objects were made with this technique that many still exist today. If you are caught injuring or killing a swan, or stealing one of its eggs in the United Kingdom, you could be fined or sent to jail for up to 6 months. These birds are protected by laws, and traditionally, certain swans are considered symbolic property of the crown. Each year, the counting called swan upping is carried out on the River Thames to record their population and health status. According to biologists working at Memorial University of Newfoundland, bread is junk food for ducks because it fattens them and spreads disease. Furthermore, frequent consumption can lead to malnutrition, as ducks stop seeking nutrient-rich natural foods, which affects their development and can contaminate the water with decaying remains. A Swedish man named Roger Tolgren received disability benefits when his obsession with heavy metal music was officially declared an addiction. Reports indicate he spent much of his time attending concerts, listening to music, and managing his collection, which interfered with his ability to maintain stable employment. Authorities evaluated his case within the social support system, considering how his behavior affected his daily life in a country known for broad criteria in certain assistance programs. The series El Chavo del Ocho was broadcast in Italy in the early 1980s under the name Cieco della Botte, and again at the end of the decade with a different dub called Una autentica peste. In the second version, the voice of La Cilindrina is performed by Monica Ward, who is also the voice of Lisa in The Simpsons in Italian. There are some episodes of El Chavo that only exist with Italian and Brazilian Portuguese dubbing because the original Spanish versions were lost at some point. The London-based ice cream company, The Lickitators, partnered with breastfeeding activist Victoria Hiley to celebrate the birth of the royal baby number 2 by relaunching its breast milk-flavored ice cream. The ice cream is called Royal Baby Gaga. It is made from donated breast milk that has been screened with hospital standards and Madagascar vanilla. Approximately 90% of the world's population lives in the Northern Hemisphere. This means that only about 700 million people live in the Southern Hemisphere. This distribution is largely due to the greater amount of habitable land and the historical concentration of major civilizations and urban centers in the north, especially in Asia, Europe, and North America. Credito Emiliano Bank in Italy accepts cheese from local Parmesan producers in exchange for cheap loans, and currently holds 430,000 wheels of Parmesan cheese valued at up to 190 million euros. I know cheese is expensive, but my goodness. Transportation laws in Sweden require that all cars have their lights on at all times, including at noon. This is because at certain times of the year there is little light, and generally for safety. Other countries, such as Norway and Denmark, have similar laws. When the Titanic sank, its sister ship, the Olympic, offered to pick up survivors. The captain of the Carpathia rejected the original offer because he feared the survivors would panic upon seeing a ship that had just sunk, asking them to board. One of the creators of the video game Half-Life, Mark Laidlaw, once stated that if a Half-Life movie were ever made, his preferred director to make it would be Guillermo del Toro. Plans to make an adaptation have been reported on different occasions, but did not lead to anything concrete. On October 29, 1998, the first astronaut to orbit the Earth, John Glenn, made history again by becoming the oldest man to fly into space. He traveled aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery at the age of 77 as part of a NASA study on health problems associated with aging. North Americans work more, take fewer vacations, and retire later than people in other industrialized countries. This is partly due to labor policies with fewer mandatory days off and a culture that values productivity, as well as retirement systems that often incentivize staying longer in the workforce. Adjusted for inflation, the Dutch East India Company was the most valuable company in history. In 1637, it was worth what would today be equivalent to $7.4 trillion. It was one of the first corporations to issue shares to the public and operate as a multinational, controlling trade routes, territories, and armies. Its power was such that it could sign treaties, mint currency, and establish colonies, profoundly influencing global trade in spices and other products. South African architect Clara de Cruz Almeida has designed a small, portable house that can be packed into a capsule of 258 square feet and shipped anywhere. Dogs watch more television now than before due to flat-screen TVs, which flicker at a speed that dogs' eyes can actually process. This allows them to perceive images more clearly than on older televisions, so they can react to visual stimuli such as movements or sounds of other animals. The actor Sylvester Stallone wanted to use the Queen song, "Another One Bites the Dust," as the main theme of the movie Rocky III, but the band did not reach an agreement with him. Since they refused, Stallone instead hired the band Survivor to create an original song. The result was Eye of the Tiger, which became one of the most iconic movie themes. Lady Gaga has an entire genus of ferns named after her. A sequence of DNA spells Gaga, and the ferns have qualities similar to those of Gaga. Some of them resemble her elaborate stage outfits, and one of them is even called Gaga Monster Parva. This is the last known photo of the Titanic before it sank. It was taken in 1912, shortly before its final voyage, and over time, it has become a valuable historical document, allowing observation of details of the ship in normal conditions, just before the tragic journey that would mark the history of navigation. A Swedish woman named Elena Pawson lost her wedding ring for 16 years before finding it growing in a carrot in her garden in 2011. The ring had accidentally slipped off while she was working in the soil, and over time, the carrot grew around it without anyone noticing. Most of the different cultures in the world have myths related to levitation, mainly linked to religion as a confirmation of divinity. For example, gurus who levitate after practicing meditation. So far, there is no scientific evidence that something like this can occur, but it is interesting that these stories have been so persistent across different cultures. Although George Washington chose the site for the White House, he never lived there. In fact, he is the only president who did not reside in the White House. The construction of the building began in 1792 and was not completed until the administration of John Adams, who became the first occupant in 1800, when the city of Washington was still developing. "Live free or die" is the official motto of the state of New Hampshire and is written on all vehicle license plates. Ironically, the prisoners in New Hampshire are the ones who manufacture these plates. This motto was adopted in 1945 and is tied to the state's revolutionary history. The plates are produced within prison labor programs where inmates learn trades and earn small wages, which also helps reduce costs for the state system. Crystal the monkey has appeared in more than 25 films, including Night at the Museum and The Hangover Part 2. Thanks to her charisma and on-camera skills, she has become one of the most recognized animal actors in Hollywood, even receiving special awards within the animal entertainment industry. The actor Anthony Mackie, known for being Falcon in the Marvel Universe, once stated in an interview that raccoon meat is one of the best he has ever tasted. Those present did not know whether he was joking or not. In fact, raccoon was a staple food in the southern United States in the 19th century and was part of Thanksgiving meals. But with the industrialized production of farm animals, it stopped being popular. More twins are born in Nigeria than anywhere else on Earth. In particular, the Yoruba region has some of the highest rates in the world, with communities where multiple births are relatively common. It is believed that genetic factors and the local diet, rich in certain tubers such as yams, may influence this high frequency. In 2010, photographer Robert Haas captured a photo of a flock of migrating flamingos forming the shape of a giant flamingo in the Gulf of Mexico. This type of formation occurs when birds adjust their flight as a group, creating surprising patterns that can only be fully appreciated from the air. Liam Neeson was about to get the role of James Bond, but turned it down when his late wife Natasha Richardson told him she would not marry him if he accepted the role. The writer H.P. Lovecraft wrote nearly 100,000 letters during his lifetime, and many of these are preserved in archival collections. He is estimated to be one of the people who wrote the most letters in all of history. The writer Voltaire is also among the top. With the rise of electronic mail, the number of written letters decreased considerably. The Hunger Games is banned in Vietnam. The film was originally only delayed, but according to a member of the National Film Board of Vietnam, the board considers the film too violent and voted unanimously for it to be banned. Researchers in Indonesia developed a male contraceptive from the Jendahusa plant, known for compounds that affect sperm mobility. In initial tests, it showed nearly 99% effectiveness, generating significant interest as an alternative to traditional methods. However, its market release has been delayed, and it is still undergoing study and evaluation. A study conducted in the United Kingdom in 2011 shows that the average family of 4 loses up to 60 socks per year. The study also estimated that much of these losses occur during washing, when socks get trapped in other garments, slip into drum spaces, or are misplaced when separating laundry. Furthermore, the accumulation of unmatched pieces is so common that many people end up storing them for months before finally discarding them. According to a study published in the journal Nature, in which 42 articles from different topics were analyzed at random, Wikipedia had an average error rate per entry of 3.86, compared to 2.92 for Encyclopedia Britannica, a difference that was smaller than expected. According to a team of astronomers and geologists led by J. Alexis Rodriguez at the Planetary Science Institute in Tucson, Arizona, there is evidence that there were 2 massive tsunamis on Mars billions of years ago. Both were caused by meteorite impacts and occurred millions of years apart. They created waves up to 150 feet high. The greater honey-guide bird leads people to beehives, and after the honey is harvested, the bird eats what remains of the hive. This relationship, documented in regions of Africa, is one of the few known examples of cooperation between humans and wild animals, where both benefit without domestication. The richest superhero is actually Black Panther, King of Wakanda. He has an estimated worth of $500 billion, while Tony Stark is estimated at only $100 billion and Bruce Wayne at only $80 billion. Some sugars are not vegan, for an almost absurd reason. Some refineries whiten sugar using activated carbon made from cow bones. The resulting sugar does not actually contain bones, but the process prevents it from being considered vegan. This does not happen with muscovado or organic sugar. The California condor is the largest flying bird in North America. Its wingspan can reach up to 10 feet from tip to tip, and it can fly at an altitude of 15,100 feet by catching air currents. This species was on the brink of extinction in the 1980s, when fewer than 30 individuals remained. But conservation programs have allowed its reintroduction into the wild in several areas of the western United States. Created in Italy, Let's Pizza is the first pizza vending machine in the world and can deliver fresh pizza with customized ingredients in just 3 minutes. The automated process includes preparing the dough, baking, and adding toppings, all within the same machine. In Poland, instead of saying, "not my problem," people say, "not my circus, not my monkey." I'm going to have to start using that. This expression comes from the Polish "nie mój cyrk, nie moje małpy," and is used to indicate that someone does not want to get involved in someone else's complicated situation. It is quite common in informal conversation and reflects a direct but humorous way of distancing oneself without entering unnecessary conflicts. Nintendo cartridges with demo labels, incomplete prototypes, or marked "not for resale" are sought after by collectors because of their rarity. They were internal materials for stores, magazines, or conventions such as E3. Incomplete levels and discarded mechanics can be worth up to thousands of dollars and are considered pieces of digital archaeology. The first Ferris wheel was invented in 1893 for the Chicago World's Fair by George W. Ferris. It was 260 feet tall, cost 50 cents per ride, and could carry 60 passengers in each of the 36 cars. That is a total capacity of 2,160 passengers. The Kawah Ijen volcano in Indonesia burns blue along with its lava due to the high amounts of sulfur gas contained within it. This phenomenon occurs when the gases ignite upon contact with oxygen, creating flames visible in the dark and attracting scientists and travelers from around the world. In 2012, the creators of an anti-piracy advertisement were fined for using stolen music in their ads. The case was ironic because the campaign aimed to raise awareness about respecting copyright, but used a track without the appropriate license. Upon detecting the infringement, legal actions were taken, and the content had to be removed or modified. Buzz Lightyear from Toy Story was actually named in honor of astronaut Buzz Aldrin, the second astronaut to walk on the moon. His name pays tribute to the space age and connects with the spirit of exploration that marked missions such as Apollo 11, which helps give the character a more credible and symbolic identity within the story. The urine of a maned wolf smells like marijuana. This odor is due to chemical compounds present in its urine that are very similar to those in certain plants, and it is so distinctive that it has even caused confusion in zoos, where it was mistakenly thought that there had been drug use on the premises. During the construction of the One World Trade Center building, there was a Subway restaurant installed on the top floor inside a shipping container. As more floors were added to the building, the restaurant was moved up to the next level. Raising it each floor took about 2 hours. Every year, London celebrates the Great British Duck Race, where people buy rubber ducks to help support various charities. The ducks race more than half a mile along the River Thames, and the first to cross the finish line wins a cash prize. In 2009, they set a world record for the largest plastic duck race with more than 205,000 ducks. A businessman named Armand Hammer, coincidentally, worked on the board of the company Arm & Hammer. Although many believe the brand's name comes from him, the company already existed before, and its name refers to the symbol of an arm with a hammer. A study found that there is a correlation between sleep deprivation and brain reduction. It is simply unknown which causes the other. MRI research has observed that prolonged poor sleep is associated with changes in the volume of certain brain regions, especially areas related to memory and decision-making. In 1807, Napoleon invaded Portugal, forcing the entire royal family to flee to Brazil, which at that time was a colony. This allowed them to continue operating the Portuguese Empire from Rio de Janeiro, which became the capital of Portugal for 13 years. It is the only time that the capital of an empire has been located in one of its colonies. In fact, it snowed in the Sahara Desert in 1979 and 2012. These events occurred in elevated areas such as Algeria, where temperatures can drop enough in winter, and although the snow usually lasts a short time, in some cases it has covered dunes, creating very unusual landscapes in the region. While filming I Am Legend, Will Smith became so attached to his co-star, Abby the German Shepherd, that he asked if he could keep her, but the owner refused. The actor commented in interviews that he formed a strong bond with the animal during filming, making the scenes they shared even more emotional. The rarest wild cat in the world is the Bornean bay cat. Only 12 specimens were captured and studied between 1874 and 2002. That is, one every 10 years at the time of this record. This elusive feline, known scientifically as Catopuma badia, lives in the dense jungles of Borneo and is rarely seen in the wild. Most information about it comes from camera traps, as its extremely secretive behavior makes direct study difficult. The classic United States Postal Service trucks made by Grumman were put into service between 1987 and 1994, and they have been so durable that it was not until 2023 that they began to be replaced by the next generation with more technology. In some areas, units with more than 34 years of use are still in operation. The White House, the Empire State Building, the Willis Tower, and Dodger Stadium are so large that they have their own zip codes. This makes it easier to manage the enormous volume of mail they receive daily, especially in office buildings and landmark locations that concentrate thousands of deliveries and visitors constantly. The Citarum River in Indonesia is considered the most polluted river in the world, full of dyes, chemicals, and many other unpleasant substances. Much of this pollution comes from textile industries and domestic waste, which has led to massive cleanup initiatives and government programs attempting to restore its ecosystem. The most expensive bottled water in the world is Acqua di Cristallo Tributo a Modigliani, priced at $60,000 for 25.36 fluid ounces. It comes from France or Fiji and is contained in a 24-karat solid gold bottle. In the city of Laguna, Brazil, bottlenose dolphins cooperate with local fishermen to catch silverfish. This alliance has been documented since 1847. The dolphins herd schools toward the shore and then signal fishermen waiting in the water to cast their nets. And in the end, they are given fish as a reward. The duck-billed platypus and the echidna are the only two mammals that lay eggs. Both belong to the group of monotremes, a very ancient branch of mammals that also produce milk, although they do not have nipples, since they secrete it through the skin to feed their young. In addition, the platypus has a venomous spur on its hind legs, something very rare among mammals. Mariana Naumova is a Russian powerlifter who became famous from a very young age for her impressive bench press records. During her adolescence, she managed to lift around 375 pounds, becoming one of the most outstanding competitors in her category and breaking several international youth records. Sandcastles are more likely to kill people than sharks, as more people have died falling into holes dug to build sandcastles than from shark attacks. These accidents usually occur when sand walls collapse suddenly, trapping the person and making it difficult to breathe. That is why some beaches have implemented recommendations and limits on hole depth, especially in tourist areas where this type of construction is common. During the era of alcohol prohibition in the United States, wine producers began selling bricks of concentrated grape juice. They came with precise instructions on what not to do so that it would not ferment and accidentally turn into wine. People simply ignored these warnings and prepared it at home. Grand Banks, Newfoundland, Canada is the foggiest place in the world, with 206 days of fog each year. This occurs due to the collision of the cold Labrador Current with the warm Gulf Stream, creating perfect conditions for dense fog banks that have complicated navigation for centuries and were a factor in numerous historical shipwrecks in the area. Charlie Sheen once spent more than $6,500 to buy 2,615 seats at a baseball game in order to catch a home run ball. That day, he went home empty-handed. The Tomorrow Chicken Contest in 1948 was created to develop superior meat chickens, and now most of the chicken we eat comes from the winner of that contest, whose genetics dominate global poultry farms. That's a bit strange, but delicious. The sun appears yellow because of atmospheric scattering. Outside Earth, the sun appears white because it contains the entire visible light spectrum, but when passing through Earth's atmosphere, air molecules scatter blue wavelengths more strongly, reducing their presence in the direct light that reaches our eyes. There is a toilet made by Kohler called Numi that has a heated seat, foot warmers, lights, and Bluetooth technology. Who needs Bluetooth for a toilet? In addition, it allows you to play music, adjust the water temperature, and even customize ambient lighting, turning it into an experience closer to a spa than a regular bathroom. The shortest prison sentence in history occurred in 1906, when a man named Joe Munch was sentenced to 1 minute in jail. The case is frequently cited as a legal curiosity, although exact details vary according to historical sources. Bill Haast, also known as the Snake Man, was bitten by venomous snakes more than 120 times in his life. He injected snake venom every day for over 60 years to develop immunity, and with his blood rich in antibodies, he managed to save 21 victims of snake bites worldwide. There is a hotline in Germany called Schimpflos, which means swear to vent, where people can call after a stressful day at work. This service emerged as a curious way to release emotional tension, allowing users to express themselves without consequences and completely anonymously. Salt and pepper actually come in liquid form in space. If astronauts tried to sprinkle normal salt and pepper, they would simply float everywhere. That is why at NASA, they dissolve them in water to apply them with droppers and prevent them from dispersing in microgravity, where even small particles can interfere with equipment or be easily inhaled inside the spacecraft. A Swedish man named Peter Skillerberg survived for 2 months in a car covered by snow, eating snow and keeping warm in a sleeping bag. His case drew the attention of experts, who noted that his body entered a state similar to hibernation, reducing his metabolism to withstand extreme cold. There is a religion called Dudism, based on the movie The Big Lebowski, which advocates practicing going with the flow, keeping a cool head, and taking it easy. Its followers are inspired by the relaxed lifestyle of the main character and promote a simple philosophy focused on reducing everyday stress. Many mountains and mountain ranges on Saturn's moon Titan have names of places from Middle-earth that appear in the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, mainly in The Lord of the Rings, such as Mount Doom, Erebor, or the Lonely Mountain, the Misty Mountains, and the White Mountains, among others. Landscape Arch in Arches National Park, Utah, has the longest span of natural rock in the world, with a length of 290 feet. It is surprisingly thin in some sections, and in recent decades, it has lost fragments of rock, which has increased concern about its stability and has led to restricting access beneath the arch to protect visitors. In 1986, a French woman named Nadine Vasseur was so determined to get her husband out of jail that she learned to fly a helicopter and flew over the prison where he was to pick him up from the roof. She succeeded, but was arrested shortly afterward. In German, the word Schadenfreude means pleasure from seeing others fail or suffer misfortunes. It literally means joy from the harm. Among the roles actor Sean Connery rejected at some point during his career are John Hammond in Jurassic Park, Morpheus in The Matrix, Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs, Dumbledore in Harry Potter, and Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings. Raccoons are very intelligent and have learned to adapt to their urban environment by opening doors and trash cans. They also have remarkable memory and dexterity with their front paws, allowing them to solve simple problems and find food even in highly human-modified settings. Maruyama Zoo in Japan spent 4 years trying to mate 2 hyenas before realizing that both were males. I feel like that is pretty obvious. You just have to look that both had male parts. The word oía is the only word in Spanish that has 3 syllables and 3 letters. It is the imperfect past tense conjugation of the verb oír, and each syllable is a vowel. Since it is a grave word, its stressed syllable is on the second letter. The Nile crocodile rolls and squeezes its eggs in its mouth to help its young emerge. It does so with very controlled pressure, enough to break the shell without harming the babies, and then carefully transports them to the water, where it continues to protect them during their first days of life from possible predators. In Thailand, people send 555 to each other instead of ha ha ha. Neuroscience studies have discovered that brain patterns synchronize when people have conversations, as our brains constantly try to predict what the other person will say next. 4 college football players were caught being honest in 2013 when they entered a convenience store that left its door unlocked and left cash on the counter for the items they took. The store owner rewarded each with a $50 gift certificate. Apple does not ship its products by boat. Instead, to reduce delivery time, they transport their inventory on first-class flights. The Monty Python comedy film Life of Brian was funded almost entirely by musician George Harrison after they ran out of budget. Harrison provided the money simply because he wanted to see how the movie would turn out. Later, one of the actors mentioned that this act was like buying the most expensive movie ticket of all. The Pope has his own vehicle that he uses in his public appearances called the Pope-mobile. You probably already knew that, but what you might not know is that it has bulletproof glass surrounding it, as well as a handrail for him to hold onto while he stands and greets the crowd in order to get in and out. It is designed to protect him while still allowing him to be visible to the crowds. Elvis Presley once tipped a limousine driver by buying him the same limousine he had been using to drive him around. He was known for his impulsive generosity and for giving extravagant gifts to both friends and strangers. These gestures became part of his public image during his peak fame in the 1960s and 70s. Lucy and Maria Aylmer are actually twins. They just have parents of different races. They were born in the United Kingdom to a mother of Jamaican descent and a father of European origin, which resulted in an unusual genetic combination. While one inherited lighter features, the other had darker skin, something that can occur when different genes related to pigmentation are mixed. Mark Zuckerberg has publicly stated that he would never allow a dislike button on Facebook because he thinks it would not be good for the world. This is despite recent rumors that, in fact, they are working on a dislike button. In 2012, John and Frances Canning invited Queen Elizabeth to their wedding in Manchester as a prank. To everyone's surprise, the Queen appeared at the hotel where the event was taking place, as she was in the area for official engagements. greeting the newlyweds and making the moment an unforgettable anecdote. In China, more than 10 million weddings are held each year. Couples typically spend an average of between $10,000 and $15,000 per event, depending on the city and economic level. The wedding industry in the country exceeds $200 billion, driven by urban growth, luxury, and new digital trends. The most isolated volcano on the planet is Mount Sidley in West Antarctica. It measures 13,781 feet, placing it among the tallest volcanoes in the world. To get there, special flights from the Antarctic base McMurdo are required, followed by a journey across ice that has never seen human activity. It has been inactive for millions of years. In the last 90 years, bears have killed 82 Americans, but teddy bears cause 22 deaths each year. These figures are usually related to domestic accidents, especially in the case of young children, where seemingly harmless objects can pose risks if used improperly. In contrast, fatal encounters with real bears are extremely rare and usually occur in very specific circumstances in natural settings. Researchers reported that humans use more DNA inherited from their fathers than from their mothers, so genetically speaking, you resemble your father more than your mother. Humans have a highly developed sense for orienting themselves and finding water. Our smell receptors are especially good at detecting geosmin, a molecule produced by bacteria and algae, especially when it mixes with ozone and water. That smell of wet earth allows us to perceive how recent rainfall was in a place. It developed strongly because it helped our ancestors survive. The trapjaw ant from Central and South Africa can snap its mandibles at a speed of up to 145 miles per hour. To put that into context, that is 23 times faster than a blink. Habitat 67 is a model community and housing complex in Montreal and is considered an architectural milestone, as well as one of the city's most recognizable buildings. Designed by Moshe Safdie for the 1967 World Exposition, it stands out for its modular structure of interconnected cubes that aim to combine urban density with open spaces and private terraces. Forrest Fenn, an American collector and millionaire, hid a treasure valued between $1 and $3 million in the Rocky Mountains and left a poem full of clues to find it. For years, thousands of people tried to solve the riddle without success. However, in 2020, someone finally found the loot, ending one of the most famous and mysterious searches of the modern era. Twin brothers named Sergio and Fika Motsoeneng cheated while running a 55.3-mile ultramarathon in South Africa in 1999. Every certain number of miles, they would change clothes in portable bathrooms to make it seem like they were the same person. Because of this, they finished among the top positions. They were discovered and disqualified after analyzing photos where they had the watch on the wrong wrist and differences in their footwear. All NHL hockey pucks are frozen before the game because they slide more smoothly and quickly when frozen. A cold puck also bounces less and maintains its shape better, which helps make the game more controlled and predictable, even at high speeds on the ice. The popular mobile game Clash of Clans once generated around $1.5 million in daily revenue at its peak. Over the years, its figures have fluctuated, but it remains one of the most successful titles in mobile gaming history, with a huge and steady player base. The Gretzky brothers hold the NHL record for most points scored by a pair of brothers together, scoring 2,861 points. Brent scored 4 of those points, and Wayne scored the other 2,857. Theaters in France in the 18th century used to hire people whose job was to applaud, become emotional, and even cry at the appropriate moments in order to influence the audience and give them a better experience, even if the play was not very good. Decades later, the same thing was done on television with laugh tracks. In the music industry, for every $1,000 of music sold, the average musician receives only about $23.40. This figure can vary depending on contracts, royalties, and platforms, but it reflects how much of the revenue is distributed among record labels, production, distribution, and marketing. A book called Becoming Batman: The Possibility of a Superhero was published in 2008 by a neuroscience professor and discusses how much a normal person would need to train and adapt to become a superhero like Batman. In 2008, Felix Batista, a kidnap negotiation specialist, was reported missing in Mexico shortly after giving a lecture on the topic. His case has been widely discussed due to the unexpected nature of the situation and remains a mystery to this day. Irony. Paul McCartney is the only musician to have topped the charts as a solo artist and in a duo, trio, quartet, and quintet. This achievement includes his work with the Beatles, Wings, and other collaborations, establishing him as one of the most versatile and successful figures in popular music history. A person weighs more at the North Pole than at the equator. This is because planet Earth is wider at the equator, so people there are farther from Earth's center, resulting in less gravitational force in addition to the centrifugal force of rotation. However, the difference is so small that it is barely noticeable. Other factors affect weight more significantly. Lake Bellandur in Bangalore, India, is so toxic that it is covered in foam and sometimes catches fire. The foam is the result of toxic water that contains a large amount of ammonia and phosphate, and very little dissolved oxygen due to decades of untreated chemical waste flowing into it. Because of the amount of grease, oil, and detergent in the foam, it often ignites. Approximately 4.6% of New York City's population has a net worth of over $1 million, meaning 1 in 21 New Yorkers is a millionaire. The city concentrates one of the largest amounts of wealth in the world, especially in sectors such as finance, technology, and real estate. However, it also exhibits high economic inequality, with neighborhoods where the cost of living is extremely high, and others where much of the population faces economic hardship. The director of the 1980 horror film Cannibal Holocaust had to prove in court that the actors were alive and were not killed during filming. The controversy arose because the film, directed by Ruggero Deodato, used such a realistic style that many believed the scenes were authentic. Some actors even signed contracts to not appear in public after the release, which increased suspicions. They were eventually brought to court to prove it was all acting. Studies have shown that when waitresses draw a happy face on the check, it can increase the tip by up to 20%. Look for it next time you eat out. According to a study led by Yegor Malyshev, a zoologist at St. Petersburg State University, the red kangaroo and the eastern gray kangaroo are almost always left-handed. Research with several species of marsupials showed that they prefer to use their left paw for tasks such as feeding or supporting themselves, something uncommon outside of primates, and that suggests a more complex brain lateralization than previously thought in these animals. The Singapore passport is the only one in the world that does not require a visa to enter North Korea, South Korea, China, or the United States. In 2025, it was ranked as the most powerful passport. In addition to the mentioned countries, its citizens can enter another 189 countries without needing a visa. The sport of lacrosse originated in northern North America in the 12th century, where matches could last for days on enormous fields as a way to resolve disputes, sometimes with hundreds of players at the same time. It was later modified after colonization. People living in Estonia have been able to vote over the internet since 2005. The system, known as remote electronic voting, allows citizens to cast their vote from anywhere using secure digital identification. And it has become one of the most advanced examples of digital democracy, with increasing participation in national and local elections. A gallon of McDonald's barbecue sauce from 20 years ago, used for the McJordan burger in the early 1990s, sold for almost $10,000 in 2012. Yes, a good use of money. There is a 10-year-old girl named Esther Okade who is already enrolled in university and has the highest exam grades in her class. She mastered algebra at the age of 4. Born in the United Kingdom, she began showing exceptional mathematical abilities from a very young age and reached university-level mathematics as one of the youngest students in the country. Esther Okade has even expressed her desire to become a millionaire at an early age thanks to her talent. Facebook has over 1 billion users, and more than 10,000 of them die each day, meaning that deceased Facebook users will soon outnumber the living. This also implies it could become a digital cemetery by the year 2065. There are headbands shaped like cat ears called Nekomimi that have a device which measures brain waves so they can move according to the emotions of the person wearing them, just like a real cat would. Microlattice is the lightest metal ever made. It is approximately 99.99% air and is so light that it can literally rest on a dandelion. It is made entirely of metal, but it is 100 times lighter than polystyrene. Actors who become extras as zombies in The Walking Dead actually have to attend zombie school, where they are graded on how convincing they are as zombies. During this training, led by special effects specialist Greg Nicotero, they learn to move irregularly, control their breathing, and maintain believable expressions during long hours of filming. They are even assigned different levels of decomposition to adjust their behavior on screen according to the character's stage. The Pixar team devised the concepts for WALL-E, A Bug's Life, Monsters, Inc., and Finding Nemo during a lunch in 1994. Key creatives such as John Lasseter, Andrew Stanton, Pete Docter, and Joe Ranft participated in that meeting, exchanging ideas that later became some of the most influential animated films of the following decades. In Aldous Huxley's dystopian futuristic novel Brave New World from 1932, there is mention of manufacturing humans in jars as part of the satire of a future civilization. Although research on this was already being conducted in real life, it was not until 1978 that the first test tube baby was born. Hurricane Patricia of 2015 is the strongest hurricane recorded in the Western Hemisphere. It had winds of up to 200 miles per hour. It reached that intensity in the Pacific Ocean near Mexico in a very short time, becoming an extreme case of rapid intensification before making landfall and quickly weakening upon encountering mountainous terrain. This is the Barcode Building in St. Petersburg, Russia. It was designed by the architecture firm Vitruvius & Sons and stands out for its facade with white and black stripes that simulate a real barcode. It is located in a modern residential area and has attracted attention for its unusual style in the city. The visual contrast is not only decorative, but also helps differentiate structural sections and maximize natural lighting in the apartments. There is a vodka bottle that costs $3,750,000 and is filtered through sand made of crushed diamonds and gems. This luxury product, known as billionaire vodka, stands out not only for its extreme filtering process, but also for its presentation, as the bottle is usually decorated with thousands of crystals and exclusive details. Beyond the content, much of its value comes from the design and exclusivity concept aimed at collectors and high-net-worth clients. The name bazooka comes from a homemade musical instrument invented by American comedian Bob Burns in the 1930s that resembled the anti-tank weapon developed by the United States Army for World War II. The nickname became popular in 1943. The bowhead whale, which lives exclusively in the Arctic, has the thickest blubber of all whales. It can reach a thickness of 28 inches. This layer allows it to survive in extremely cold waters and also store enormous energy reserves, which contributes to its remarkable longevity, as some individuals have exceeded 200 years of age. If humans had eagle vision, we would be able to see an ant walking on the ground from the roof of a 10-story building. In fact, everything would also be in bright colors, and objects in our line of sight would be magnified. Eagles have a much higher density of photoreceptor cells than humans and can perceive details at long distances with great precision. They also have a wider field of vision and the ability to detect certain ranges of light that we cannot perceive. In 1883, the bodies of a bear and a man named Frank Devereaux were found dead, side by side, with the ground around them destroyed. It is believed that the man and the bear fought to the death. The Indus dolphin has eyes so small that scientists believe it can only detect the intensity and direction of light, but cannot form clear images. They navigate using a sophisticated echolocation system through high-frequency clicks that bounce off objects. It is the inspiration for submarine sonar and is considered a living fossil because it is one of the oldest dolphin species in existence. There is a sauna in Norway that can hold 150 people. It is a large wooden structure located on a beach overlooking the Arctic Ocean. This type of coastal sauna is common in the northern part of the country, where the experience usually combines intense heat with cold water baths, a deeply rooted tradition that many consider revitalizing even in the middle of winter. During World War II, the Soviets built an A-40 Krylia tanka, a tank with wings. In reality, it did not work. The prototype was designed to be towed by an airplane and then glide to the battlefield, but its weight and the limitations of the planes of the time made the project unfeasible after the first tests. Shani Shingnapur is a small village in India with 300 buildings, none of which have doors on their entrances. These people leave their homes, businesses, and schools open at all times, under the belief that if someone does something dishonest, they will face 7 years of bad luck. The athlete Cristian Roberto Lopez Rodriguez from Spain broke the record for running backward 328 feet. He achieved it in just 13.7 seconds. He also holds the record for running backward in high heels for 328 feet in just 16.55 seconds. In total, he has more than 95 different Guinness records. The trombone was originally called sacabuche. The name comes from Old Spanish and refers to the movement of pulling out and pushing in the slide, which is the instrument's main characteristic. It was widely used during the Renaissance in the Baroque in Europe, especially in religious and court music, before adopting its modern name. An artist named Johannes Stotter spent 4 years painting a woman to look like a parrot. Yes, that is a woman, not a parrot. Look closely. The work required weeks of planning, several hours of body painting, and very precise body positioning to create the optical illusion, something characteristic of the artist, famous for transforming people into animals with astonishing realism. Stephen Hawking was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis at 21 years old, a disease that usually drastically reduces life expectancy. However, he defied all predictions and lived for decades with the condition, becoming one of the most influential scientists of his time. He passed away in 2018 at 76 years old, far exceeding initial medical expectations. Palm trees are monocots, meaning they have only one cotyledon in the seed, parallel veins in the leaves, and fibrous roots. This means they are more closely related to grass and corn than to trees such as pines and maples. Port Lincoln, Australia celebrates an annual festival called Tuna Rama. The main event is the World Championship Tuna Toss, where the winner is the one who can throw their tuna the farthest. A full decade after September 11th, the New York Times created Portraits of Grief, an archive of articles about each September 11th victim and how their families are coping. There are more than 500 different ways to cook potatoes. In fact, the wife of the former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev made a recipe book about this, which was given to Britain. It is currently in the British Foreign Office. In 1443, King Sejong the Great created Hangul, the Korean alphabet. He did this in response to the great difficulty common people had in learning Chinese characters. The day of its publication is now a national holiday in both Koreas. In the 1940s, there was a television remote control that was connected to the device with a 20-foot cable. One of the first commercial models was developed by Zenith Electronics and was known as Lazy Bones, allowing users to change channels without getting up, although the cable was inconvenient and prone to tangling, which led to the creation of wireless versions a few years later. Vladimir Lenin, the Russian communist revolutionary, was put on display when he died in Red Square in Moscow against his wishes, which would be buried alongside his wife. After his death in 1924, Soviet authorities decided to preserve his body and place it in Lenin's mausoleum, where it remains to this day. The embalming process requires constant maintenance and dedicated specialists, and for decades his body has been visited by millions as a historical and political symbol of the former Soviet Union. There is an infrared device that detects the location of patients' veins and projects them onto the skin. These devices, such as the AccuVein AV400, use infrared light to identify blood beneath the skin and then show a visual map in real time, facilitating procedures like blood draws or intravenous placement. They are especially useful in patients with difficult-to-locate veins, such as children, the elderly, or dehydrated patients. New Zealand is the country where people have the most pets. 68% of all households have at least one pet. However, when counted individually, the United States has the most dogs and cats, 69 million dogs and 74 million cats. Prince Charles is actually a descendant of Vlad the Impaler, the cruel Romanian warlord of the 15th century who helped inspire Bram Stoker's vampire novel of 1897, Dracula. This connection comes from ancient European noble lines, and the monarch himself has shown interest in Romania, frequently visiting the Transylvania region, historically associated with the figure of Vlad. Believe it or not, crocodiles can climb trees, and do so often. Documented research has observed these reptiles climbing trunks and inclined branches to sunbathe or survey their surroundings from a better position. This behavior has been seen in various species, especially young specimens, which take advantage of their lightness and agility. They can reach heights of several meters and remain still for long periods, allowing them to surprise prey or avoid threats in their natural habitat. The first animal to ask an existential question was a parrot named Alex. It asked what color it was and learned that it was gray. This famous African parrot, studied by scientist Irene Pepperberg, demonstrated surprising cognitive abilities, such as recognizing colors, shapes, and quantities. Its ability to ask simple questions was seen as evidence of advanced thinking in animals, something rare outside of humans. One of the wines served in the restaurant in the movie Ratatouille is the Lacerte brand. This is because of John Lacerte, Pixar's executive producer. However, this is not fictional. This wine brand really exists and belongs to him and his family. The dandelion plant, or weed, is edible. The leaves can be eaten in salads or steamed. The flowers are sweet and crunchy, and they can be eaten battered, fried, or raw. They can even be used to make wine, and the roots can be dried and roasted to be used as a coffee substitute. In 2013, a man in China hired players to kill his son's avatar in video games to discourage his gaming habit and get him to look for a job. The case became known when the son himself reported that strangers constantly appeared to sabotage his games, eliminating his characters in progress. This strategy, although unusual, was part of a desperate attempt to reduce his online gaming time in a context where video game addiction was becoming a growing concern in the country. Istanbul has a vending machine that releases food and water for stray dogs in exchange for recyclable bottles. These machines, developed by the company Pugadon, allow people to deposit plastic bottles and, in return, release food and water for the animals. The initiative seeks to reduce waste while helping the city's numerous stray dogs, creating a system where recycling directly benefits the community and animals. One of the oldest literary texts preserved today is the Instructions of Shurupak, which were carved into stone more than 4,500 years ago in Mesopotamia. They contain advice and instructions on how to be a good person, and one of them says, "You should not judge when you drink beer." Australians are the largest consumers of meat in the world. They consume about 200 pounds per year, and the United States is right behind them, consuming just under that with 198 pounds per year. That is a lot of meat. There is a floating stage in Singapore that rests on the water and can support the weight of 9,000 people. It is used as a football field, concert stage, and celebration venue. This place, known as the Float Marina Bay, was for years the largest floating stage in the world and has hosted major national events, including parades and mass celebrations, thanks to its structure designed to withstand maritime conditions and large crowds. In 1871, under his original name Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain invented and received a patent for the elastic strap for bra suspenders. His patent stated, and I quote, "The nature of my invention consists of an adjustable and detachable elastic strap for vests, trousers, or other garments that require straps, as will be described in more detail below." Freddie Mercury's favorite song was Somebody to Love, but he did not want to say it publicly because he did not want people to think he only liked his own music. This song, released in 1976 with the band Queen, demanded one of the most complex vocal performances of his career. Mercury recorded multiple layers of vocals to achieve a choral effect inspired by gospel music, something uncommon in rock at that time, which elevated his reputation as a vocalist. A study in the Journal of Positive Psychology concluded that 2/3 of human beings have no idea what they are good at or what their strengths are. Many studies suggest that the lack of clear feedback, constant comparison with others, and little personal reflection can make it difficult for someone to recognize their own abilities. In the Giro d'Italia cycling competition in the 1914 edition, one of the riders decided to finish a stage by getting into a car. He thought no one would notice because the route was filled with fog. However, the judges discovered it and expelled him. This event remains a memorable story of this competition, which is still held today. Owls cannot roll or move their eyes, so they have to turn their heads to look to the sides. Their eyes are fixed in their sockets, but their neck is extremely flexible, which allows them to rotate their head up to about 270 degrees without cutting off blood flow, thanks to special adaptations in their blood vessels. In 2014, Beyoncé earned approximately $3.65 per second. Between 45 and 75% of astronauts suffer from space adaptation syndrome, which causes dizziness, headaches, nausea, and general discomfort, but it always goes away in less than 72 hours, and they do not experience it again afterward. According to a study published in the South African Journal of Science, traces of cannabis were detected in pipes that were found in William Shakespeare's garden. Scientists examined 24 pipes using advanced gas chromatography methods and found cannabis in 8 fragments, 4 of which were confirmed to have come from the bard's garden. Musician Jack White has made statements against Guinness World Records because they removed the record he achieved with the White Stripes for the shortest concert in the world when they played a single note. Guinness responded that they had to eliminate all categories that included the shortest things in duration, such as the shortest song or poem. Researchers at the University of Montreal have concluded that everyone has the potential ability to be a good singer. It is a developed skill that improves with practice and worsens with lack of use. There is a type of berry in the Newfoundland region of Canada called bake apple, and people think the name comes from it tasting like baked apple. But that is not true. In reality, the name comes from the French phrase "ik appelle," which means, "What is this berry called?" In the scene where lightning strikes the clock tower in the movie Back to the Future, the lightning and conducted electricity were animated completely by hand instead of using digital effects. Since it was one of the key sequences of the film and people liked it, this technique was also used in the other two movies of the trilogy. If you have an irrational fear of being near, among, or in the company of teenagers, you have what is called ephemophobia. This term is used to describe an intense aversion toward young people, and although it is not always classified as a formal clinical disorder, it can influence social behavior and the negative perception of youth in different cultural contexts. The first home video game console, the Magnavox Odyssey, released in 1972, contained only 40 transistors and had no microprocessor. In comparison, the processor of the Nintendo 64 has 4.6 million transistors. You can distinguish identical twin babies by their belly buttons, since the navel is a scar and is not caused by genetics. The shape of the belly button depends on how the umbilical cord heals after birth, and factors such as the healing process and initial care, so it can vary even between twins. The reason why we currently know so much about the history of ancient Egypt is partly due to Napoleon Bonaparte's invasion of Egypt in 1798, when instead of only going to destroy, he brought a team of 160 scientists, astronomers, engineers, architects, and writers to document what they found. The ancient Greeks valued political participation and collective government. The term idiot was used in ancient Greece to describe someone who did not contribute to politics or to the community. The word comes from the Greek idiotes, which referred to a private person or someone who concerned themselves only with personal matters, without being involved in the public life of the polis. The concept of Sonic emerged because the creator of the series, Yuji Naka, was trying to finish the first level of Super Mario Bros. As fast as possible. That idea of speed inspired Sega to create a character whose gameplay would be based on running through levels at very high speed. The final design of the Blue Hedgehog debuted in 1991 and quickly became Sega's main mascot. In 2015, a teenager in Georgia was arrested for stealing a goat and later confessed that his intention was to use it as part of a creative proposal to invite a girl to the prom. The plan, which sought to make a pun with the animal, did not go as expected and ended up becoming a story as curious as it was unexpected. In 2015, Saudi Arabia proposed hosting the Olympic Games together with Bahrain, where all men's events would take place in Saudi Arabia and women's events in Bahrain, because at that time, women were prohibited from participating in sports in Saudi Arabia. But the International Olympic Committee did not allow them to submit the bid. The Nazis had a plan to kill Sir Winston Churchill with an explosive chocolate bar during World War II. Hitler's bomb makers coated explosive devices with a thin layer of dark chocolate and packaged them in expensive-looking black and gold wrapping. But fortunately, the plan was foiled by British spies. When he was only 14 years old, Malawian engineer William Kakwamba used eucalyptus, bicycle parts, and other waste to build a windmill to power the electrical devices in his home. He did this during a severe drought that had forced him to leave school, teaching himself with the help of a local library. His invention allowed water to be pumped and basic electricity to be generated. There is a town in Alaska called Whittier, where almost everyone lives and works under the same roof, inside a 14-story building. There is a police station, a school, 2 convenience stores, and also a place to stay and have breakfast if you wish to visit. Mickey Mouse and Disney characters from that era were designed with gloves because it was easier to animate them that way. However, Walt Disney once mentioned that the main reason was that he did not want them to have mouse hands, since they would have looked very strange, and he preferred that they appear more human. There is an animal called the wholphin, which is a cross between a false killer whale and a bottlenose dolphin. They are hybrids that are believed to live in the wild, but they have also been born in captivity. The most well-known case occurred in a marine park in Hawaii, where a specimen was born that showed characteristics of both species, such as intermediate size and a distinct set of teeth. During the Sapporo Snow Festival, a huge sculpture inspired by Star Wars was built using thousands of tons of snow. The work, created by specialized teams including Japanese self-defense forces, stood out for its size and level of detail, becoming one of the most impressive attractions of that year. A group of pandas is known as an embarrassment. This uncommon term comes from Old English and is not directly related to the animal's behavior, but to curious naming traditions for groups. Giant pandas tend to be solitary and only gather during mating season or when a mother cares for her cub. In the wild, they mainly inhabit mountainous bamboo forests in China, where they spend much of the day feeding. Spider-Man had more lines of dialogue in the movie Captain America: Civil War than Superman in the movie Batman v Superman. Even though Spider-Man only appeared briefly as a secondary character, he had 47 lines compared to 43 lines. Kaku Aburatsu Marine Park in Japan has small holes in the otter enclosure, allowing visitors to shake hands with these animals. The set where the car scene in the movie The Matrix Reloaded was filmed was extremely large. When it was dismantled, instead of discarding it, the material was reused to build low-cost housing in underprivileged areas in Mexico. In ancient Egypt, people were paid for their services in bread and beer. They were also paid with rations of grain, meat, and cloth, which were considered the necessities of life. But bread and beer were the most basic elements of the Egyptian diet. Many claim that the pilots in the Star Fox series are not wearing silver boots as we might think. In reality, they all have to amputate their legs and use robotic legs, so the brain does not lose blood and they do not faint from the intense G-forces they are subjected to. It is believed that Soviet diplomat Vyacheslav Molotov is the only man who shook hands with Stalin, Lenin, Hitler, Himmler, Göring, Roosevelt, and Churchill, and he is also the inspiration behind the term Molotov cocktail. The Parliament of the United Kingdom has a rock band whose members are members of Parliament, or MPs, and for that reason, they named it MP4. They were the first musicians to perform at the Palace of Westminster in the 900 years since it was built. In 2011, Tom Piercy, a farmer from York, England, created a maze by carving 2 portraits of Harry Potter the size of a football field into a cornfield. The design was created using GPS technology to achieve the details, and the site became a temporary tourist attraction that drew thousands of visitors during the summer season. The word bay, popular in North American society, is actually the Danish word for poop. Think of that the next time you call your girlfriend bae. In modern English usage, bae emerged as a shortened form of before anyone else and became popular on social media and in songs in the early 2010s. In 1948, the committee responsible for awarding the Nobel Peace Prize did not select anyone, declaring that there was no suitable living candidate, mainly as a tribute to Mahatma Gandhi, who was assassinated earlier that year. When director Steven Spielberg was 17 years old, he directed and produced a film called Firelight with a budget of $500. It was shown in a local theater to 500 people, where tickets cost $1. However, one person paid $2. This made it the director's first box office success, and he ended up with a profit of $1. The state of Alaska has more than 3 million lakes. In fact, more than 86,000 square miles of Alaska are covered by water. This enormous amount is due to glacial activity, which over thousands of years shaped the land by creating depressions that later filled with water, in addition to rivers, wetlands, and extensive coastlines that form one of the most water-rich landscapes on the planet. The Sega Dreamcast was the first console to implement online play through a telephone line. The system was called SegaNet. The Dreamcast was released in 1999. It included an integrated modem that allowed players to connect to the internet to compete or cooperate with other people. Titles like Phantasy Star Online helped popularize this early form of online play on consoles. Since 2011, there have been several incidents in the United States of people cooking substances inside a Walmart. Some of these cases involved illegal preparation in public spaces, such as bathrooms or parking lots, which forced the evacuation of stores due to the risk of toxic fumes. In 2015, a man was arrested in Canada when he tied more than 100 helium balloons to a lawn chair and flew over the city of Calgary. The first use of the acronym OMG, oh my God, was recorded in a letter sent in 1917 to United Kingdom politician Winston Churchill, when a retired admiral sent him his opinion about news of military movements. In 2016, the Edril family from Turkey suffered food poisoning from eating food that had been prepared to celebrate being discharged from the hospital for, you guessed it, food poisoning. On an island in Indonesia, if a baby dies before its teeth grow in, it is placed inside the trunk of a tree. The hole is sealed and the tree begins to heal. It is believed that the baby is absorbed. This funeral tradition is practiced among the Toraja and symbolizes that the child returns to nature. The actress Carey Mulligan and the singer Marcus Mumford were childhood friends but lost contact. Each found fame on their own, and they met again as adults by chance, and now they are married. In fact, when they resumed contact, they began writing letters to each other, something uncommon today. The PlayStation was originally planned as an add-on accessory for the Super Nintendo that included a compact disc reader, but it was ultimately decided to make it a separate console. The disagreement between Sony and Nintendo led to the joint project being cancelled, and Sony continued development on its own. The result was the first PlayStation, released in 1994, which would end up changing the video game industry. It was planned that Bill Clinton, the former president of the United States, would provide the voice of President John Eden in Fallout 3, but they were unable to secure him. In the end, the role was performed by the actor Malcolm McDowell, known for his participation in numerous films and series. His voice ended up giving the character a solemn and authoritative tone that fit very well with the atmosphere of the game. 69% of people in the back of an airplane survive accidents, while only 49% of those in the front survive. Analyses of airplane accidents have suggested that areas closer to the tail of the aircraft may offer higher chances of survival in certain types of impact. The Reznor enemies in Super Mario World are named after Trent Reznor, the vocalist of Nine Inch Nails. The Koopa Kids also have names inspired by famous musicians. For example, Ludwig von Koopa is inspired by Ludwig van Beethoven, and Iggy Koopa references Iggy Pop. Nintendo used these musical references as small cultural nods within the game. Nintendo had to distribute Super Nintendo consoles at night in Japan as a security measure so they would not be stolen by the Yakuza, the criminal organization of that country. The enormous demand for the console caused long lines in stores, so Nintendo decided to send shipments at dawn to avoid robberies and security problems. Tourists throw about 1 million euros into the Trevi Fountain in Rome, Italy, each year. They do this to make a wish. That money is collected, and the city uses it to provide food to people in need. Until the 1960s, the only method to know if a woman was pregnant consisted of injecting the woman's urine into an African frog. If she was pregnant, the frog began to ovulate within 12 hours. Thanks, technology. This method worked because the pregnancy hormone triggers that reaction in the species Xenopus laevis. Recently, in an interview, Shigeru Miyamoto admitted that he really likes Disney and that Link is inspired by Peter Pan. That is where the idea that the Kokiri never age came from. Just like the character from the story of Neverland, Link is portrayed as an adventurous boy dressed in green who lives in a forest and embarks on heroic journeys, an aesthetic that helped define the fantastical tone of the series, The Legend of Zelda. The word hurricane has different origins. According to the Mayan book Popol Vuh, it means heart of the sky and is related to the storm god. It is also related to deities in the Taíno language of the Antilles and in Quechua dialects of South America. The games Pokémon Gold and Silver were going to be the last in the popular franchise. During their development for Game Boy, the Game Freak team even included almost the entire Kanto region in addition to the new Johto region, practically doubling the size of the game. Their enormous commercial success and the response from fans convinced Nintendo to continue the series. Humans reached the moon before rolling suitcases were invented. The Apollo 11 mission occurred in 1969, while modern wheeled suitcases began to become popular in airports many years later, at the end of the 1970s. The handshake originally existed to confirm that the person you were seeing did not have a weapon. By extending the right hand, which normally held swords or daggers, both people demonstrated that they came in peace. Over time, the gesture became a universal form of greeting. Beijing, Seoul, and Tokyo mean capital in their respective languages. Beijing means northern capital in Chinese. Tokyo means eastern capital in Japanese, and Seoul comes from an ancient Korean word that simply means capital or main city, reflecting their historical role as political centers. The muscles that close a crocodile's jaw have the force equivalent to a truck falling from a cliff, but the muscles that open it are so weak that the mouth of a crocodile can be kept closed with a common elastic band. For that reason, some zookeepers can hold its snout shut with tape or with their hands, although doing so is still extremely dangerous. In Finland, traffic fines are calculated based on a person's income. This causes some millionaires in that country to pay up to 10,000 euros for running a red light. The system is called the day fine and seeks to ensure that the penalty has a similar impact on people with different economic levels. It is believed that Ditto is a failed attempt to clone Mew. This is because the two Pokemon have the same statistics, the same colors in their shiny version, and can use the ability to transform. In addition, both appear in the same areas within the first games, and Ditto can breed with almost any Pokemon, which has fueled this theory among fans for years. The first copies of Resident Evil Revelations for 3DS had a spelling error on the side of the game case. The title said Revelatins. The error appeared in the first physical copies distributed by Capcom, which turned them into curious collector pieces. In later versions of the game, and in new editions of the cartridge, the name was already corrected. Jeff Daniels was paid only $50,000 for his role in Dumb and Dumber, while Jim Carrey was paid $7 million. The producers initially did not want Daniels because he was known for dramatic roles, but Carrey insisted that he was perfect for the character. Over time, the film became a cult comedy and one of the biggest successes of the 1990s. Antarctica is a continent completely surrounded by oceans, while the Arctic Ocean is an ocean completely surrounded by continents. This geographic difference explains why the Arctic has floating ice over the sea, while Antarctica has an enormous continental mass covered by a layer of ice. In Driver 3, there is a character wearing a Hawaiian shirt named Timmy Vermicelli, clearly a parody of the Grand Theft Auto Vice City character Tommy Vercetti. They gave him floaties as a mockery of the inability to swim of the Grand Theft Auto character. In the early games of that series, if the protagonist fell into the water, he died immediately. Final Fantasy is called that because it was supposed to be the last game of the company Square, after having gone through difficult times with bad games like Rad Racer or World Runner 3D. The game ended up being an enormous success when it was released in 1987, and not only saved the company, but also gave rise to one of the most famous role-playing series in video games. Trinity College at the University of Cambridge has more Nobel Prize winners than the entire country of Italy. Founded in the 16th century by King Henry VIII, the college has been home to historical figures such as Isaac Newton, James Clerk Maxwell, and Bertrand Russell. Its scientific and academic tradition made it one of the most influential intellectual centers in Europe. The Disney movie Frozen caused an increase of 153% in searches for flights to Norway, and an increase of tourists in hotels of 37%. The aesthetic of the fictional kingdom of Arendelle is inspired by Norwegian landscapes and architecture, which sparked the interest of many fans to visit the country. Charles Martinet, the actor who provides Mario's voice, also voices the dragon Paarthurnax in Skyrim. Oh, mamma mia! Martinet has worked for decades portraying several characters in the Mario universe, including Luigi, Wario, and Waluigi, which made him one of the most recognizable voices in video games. It is impossible to press a button on a controller more than 16 times in 1 second. Seriously, try it. If someone tells you they can do more, do not believe them. In informal tests and manual skill competitions, most people fall well below that number. Surpassing it consistently without mechanical help is extremely difficult, which is why many suspicious records usually involve modified controllers or turbo functions. The man who invented the revolving door hated opening doors chivalrously for women. His name was Theophilus Van Cannel, an American inventor who patented the mechanism in 1888. Besides avoiding that social gesture that made him uncomfortable, his design also helped control air currents and maintain the temperature inside buildings more effectively. Fungi are more closely related and more similar to humans than to plants. At a biological level, they belong to a different kingdom and share certain cellular and metabolic characteristics with animals. For example, they obtain energy from organic matter instead of producing it through photosynthesis. The white towers that appear when you turn on the PlayStation 2 vary depending on the number and size of the games saved on the memory card inserted in the console. Each tower represents a save file, and its height changes according to the amount of stored data. It was a very original visual way of showing the contents of the memory. If you insert a disc from the first Xbox into a PlayStation 2, You can see an animated logo before it announces that it is not compatible. The console tries to read the disc as if it were a video DVD, and for a few seconds, an animation of the Xbox logo appears. After that, the system shows a message indicating that the format of the disc cannot be played. Before the Renaissance, 3/4 of all the books in the world were written in Chinese. For centuries, China had an enormous tradition of writing, printing, and preserving texts. The early invention of paper and woodblock printing techniques allowed many more books to be produced than in other regions of the world. More than 80% of the world's population consumes caffeine in tea, coffee, and sodas daily. This substance acts as a stimulant of the central nervous system and can help reduce the feeling of tiredness. That is why it has become one of the most widely consumed psychoactive compounds on the planet. The appearance of the character Eli Vance in Half-Life 2 is based on Larry Herbert, a homeless man the developers found on the street. According to members of the Valve team, they saw him near their offices and were impressed by his appearance. They asked for permission to photograph him and use his face as a reference when creating the character model. The Super Game Boy, the accessory for playing Game Boy titles on the Super Nintendo, contained all the Game Boy hardware except for the screen and buttons. This was because the Super Nintendo was not powerful enough to emulate the games on its own. In reality, the cartridge functioned as a complete Game Boy console inside the accessory, while the Super Nintendo only handled displaying the image on the television and reading the controls. In Australia, you can buy kangaroo meat in the supermarket. It is also present on restaurant menus. It is a healthier alternative to beef or lamb since it contains only 2% fat. In addition, it is rich in protein and iron, and its consumption is also promoted because kangaroos are very abundant in the country. If one tree were planted for every Coca-Cola sold, we could reforest the entire planet in just 3 years. The company sells billions of drinks each year in more than 200 countries, which gives an idea of the enormous scale of production and consumption of this brand worldwide. The school in the game Silent Hill 1 is based on the school from the movie Kindergarten Cop with Arnold Schwarzenegger. The building used as a reference was the elementary school that appears in that 1990 movie. The developers took its structure and adapted it to create a darker and more disturbing version within the game. Level 5 of World 5 in Kirby's Dream Land is a naked woman if you look at it from a general perspective. The shape can be seen when observing the complete world map, where the arrangement of the islands and paths creates a silhouette that many players interpreted that way. It is one of those curious details that was probably a coincidence of the design. The International Space Station costs more than 30 times its weight in gold. Its construction involved the cooperation of several space agencies and required dozens of launches over many years. It is one of the most complex and expensive structures ever built by humanity. An adult produces enough hydrogen in their urine each year to power a car for approximately 1,678 miles. This is because urine contains urea, a compound that can break down to release hydrogen. Some researchers have studied ways to take advantage of this process to generate fuel in a more sustainable way. According to the instruction manual of Super Mario Bros., when the Koopas invaded the Mushroom Kingdom, they turned all the people into stone blocks. This explains why Mario can break some blocks during the game. According to the manual, many of those blocks are actually transformed inhabitants of the kingdom, a curious detail that is not mentioned directly within the game. If you save the game during the fight against the boss, The End, in Metal Gear Solid 3, and return to the game 1 week later in real lifetime, the enemy will already have died of natural causes, and Snake will be able to continue normally. This character is an extremely elderly sniper, and the game takes into account the real passage of time on the console. When you return days later, a scene appears confirming that he died of old age. A 5-year-old boy in India fell asleep on a train and ended up lost in Calcutta. 25 years later, he was finally able to find the way back to his home thanks to Google Maps. The boy was named Saru Brierley and spent his childhood without knowing exactly where he came from. Using memories from his childhood and exploring satellite images for years, he managed to identify his town and finally reunite with his biological mother. His story inspired the movie Lion. In London, there is a cereal cafe where you can eat hundreds of cereals from all parts of the world. The place became popular for offering curious combinations with different types of milk, toppings, and sweets, turning a simple breakfast into a rather peculiar gastronomic experience. Star Ocean: Second Evolution has 100 different endings. It holds the record for being the game with the most possible endings. These endings change depending on the relationships between the characters, the decisions made during the story, and who ends up traveling together at the end of the adventure, which encourages many players to complete the game several times. Guitar Hero Aerosmith was not the first game where the American band appeared. In 1994, they starred in a spaceship game called Revolution X, where you had to rescue the musicians in a futuristic dystopia. The game was developed by Midway and originally appeared in arcade machines. Players used weapons that fired compact discs to fight against a regime that had banned music. According to a Nintendo guide from the early 90s, Yoshi's full name is T. Yoshisaur Munchakoopas. This fact appeared in official promotional material and manuals related to Yoshi's Safari. Although it is rarely mentioned within the games, this name became a popular curiosity among fans of the Mario series. There is 150% more caffeine in chocolate milk than in Coca-Cola. This happens because cocoa contains small natural amounts of caffeine and theobromine. Although the difference exists, in both cases the amounts remain relatively low compared to a cup of coffee. When the Pokemon Paris evolves into Parasect, it is actually being taken over by the mushrooms growing on its back, which control it and leave it like a zombie. That is why the absence of pupils. There are species of fungi in real life that do this to insects. 3 years of intensive education are required to become a police officer in Norway. The training takes place at a university, and each graduate receives a degree in police studies. During that time, students receive training in law, psychology, ethics, conflict resolution, and proportional use of force, reflecting the country's focus on prevention and community policing. The year after the United States Civil War ended, 20% of the budget of the state of Mississippi was spent on prosthetic limbs for wounded soldiers. Thousands of combatants returned with amputations after the fighting. State governments had to create special programs to manufacture and distribute prosthetics to veterans. The largest map in all video games belongs to the game Elder Scrolls II: Daggerfall. It is 4,000 times larger than the map of Skyrim. The world of the game covers a huge portion of the fictional region of High Rock and Hammerfell and was procedurally generated. This allowed the creation of thousands of cities, towns, and dungeons that players could explore freely. Nintendo had to spend more than $80 million to provide protective gloves to players who injured their hands playing the extreme minigames of the original Mario Party. Some games required rapidly spinning the control stick with the palm of the hand, which caused blisters and injuries in many players, especially in the United States. There are approximately 6,900 languages, but only 20 of them are used by more than half of the world's population. Languages such as Mandarin Chinese, Spanish, English, Hindi, and Arabic concentrate enormous numbers of speakers. Many of the other languages on the planet have very small communities, and several hundred are in danger of disappearing during this century. 10% of people do not like cilantro because when they eat it, it tastes like soap to them. This is due to genetic variations that cause certain people to perceive some compounds of cilantro differently, producing a sensation similar to the taste of soap. Research has pointed to variants in genes related to smell that cause certain aldehydes present in the plant to be unpleasant for some people. The popularly horrible game E.T. the Extraterrestrial for the Atari 2600 sold more units than Space Invaders, the most popular game on that console. E.T. sold 1.5 million, and Space Invaders only 1 million. The game was developed in just a few weeks, and its commercial failure led to thousands of unsold cartridges being buried in a landfill in New Mexico. The original Xbox was going to be called DirectXbox because of its use of Microsoft's DirectX technology, but later they realized it sounded very silly and simply named it Xbox. The name originated as an internal abbreviation among the developers, but it ended up being liked so much within the company that it eventually became the official name of the console. Pirates almost never looted gold, silver, and jewels. What they looked for were traded goods such as fabrics, animal skins, spices, sugar, dyes, tobacco, cocoa, cotton, and wood. These products were much more common on merchant ships and could be easily sold in ports or colonial markets, which made them a more consistent source of profit than legendary treasures. The amount of water on Earth is constant and continuously recycled over time. That means that the water you drink today could have passed through a dinosaur and come out as dinosaur urine. The water cycle causes the liquid to evaporate, condense, and fall again as rain over millions of years. The damsel in distress that Mario rescues in the original Donkey Kong game is named Pauline. In the Japanese version, she is simply called Lady. Over time, the character disappeared from the series for several years, but she returned decades later in modern games like Super Mario Odyssey, where she appears as the mayor of New Donk City. Super Mario Bros. Was the first video game to have movies. In 1986, a Japanese animated film was released, and in 1993, another with live-action actors that, if it were not for the name, nobody would have known what the hell was going on there. The live-action version was heavily criticized for its strange story and its dark style, very different from the colorful world of the game. There is an altar in Bangkok, Thailand, dedicated to a beggar. One day, a man went to pray there and later won the lottery. As a thank you to the beggar, he sent many dancers to the altar, which became a tradition. Now everyone brings sensual dancers to that place to attract good fortune. There is no red light at approximately 33 feet of depth underwater. This makes blood appear green in color. Red light is the first to be absorbed by water, which is why warm colors disappear quickly while blue and green tones penetrate more deeply. For this reason, divers and underwater photographers use artificial lights or special filters to recover the real colors that the human eye stops perceiving at certain depths. The Sega Genesis had the same Motorola processor as the first Apple Macintosh computer. Both used the Motorola 68000 processor, although running at different speeds. Thanks to this chip, which was relatively powerful for its time, the Genesis could handle fast graphics and more complex games than many other consoles of its generation. Satoshi Tajiri, the creator of Pokémon, had the idea of creating the pocket monsters after collecting caterpillars and observing how they turned into cocoons and butterflies. When he was a child, he liked collecting insects in the fields near his home in Japan. That hobby inspired him years later to imagine creatures that players could capture, trade, and train. 8 out of 10 people bite the heads off gummy bears first when they eat them. This small habit has been observed in surveys and informal experiments about eating behavior. Some theories suggest that people start with the head because it is the part we identify as the character, while others believe it is simply the easiest place to start biting. A white lion and a female white tiger had 4 cubs in 2013. They are the rarest big cats in the world: white lions, white ligers, and white Tyans. These combinations are extremely unusual and usually occur only in captivity due to the mixing of species. The photo on the cover of the album Silver and Gold by Neil Young was taken with the Game Boy camera, an accessory that turns your Game Boy into a monochrome digital camera. This small device, released in the late 90s, also allowed users to edit the images and transfer them to the portable Game Boy printer. Greyhounds have a field of vision of 270 degrees. They can see objects that are behind them. This is due to the lateral position of their eyes, which allows them to detect movement very easily. This characteristic helps them react quickly while running, something important for one of the fastest dog breeds. The application Send Me to Heaven makes you throw your phone as high as you can. The creator of this application said that he made it with the purpose of destroying as many iPhones as possible, but it was banned in the App Store. They ruined the fun. The program measured the height reached by the phone using internal sensors before it fell back down. In 1900, all the mathematical knowledge in the world could be written in only 80 books. Today, it would fill more than 100,000. Since then, the number of mathematical papers and theories has grown explosively in universities and scientific journals. Today, there are enormous academic databases dedicated exclusively to cataloging new proofs, formulas, and entire branches of mathematics. Actors who portrayed James Bond are forbidden from wearing tuxedos in all the movies they make after having played the famous agent. The idea seeks to prevent the public from associating that type of clothing too strongly with other characters. The black tuxedo became one of the most iconic images of the agent since the earliest films. Final Fantasy VII began its development as a Nintendo 64 game, but it was changed to the PlayStation due to the memory limitations of cartridges. The game, which occupied 3 PlayStation 1 discs, would have required 13 Nintendo 64 cartridges. More pure gold can be recovered from 1 short ton of computers than from approximately 18.7 short tons of raw gold ore. This is because many electronic devices contain small amounts of gold in their circuits and connectors, since it is an excellent conductor and does not oxidize. For that reason, electronic waste recycling has become an important industry for recovering valuable metals. There are no moles in Ireland. The island was never reached by this species after the last glaciation, so the animal simply is not part of its native fauna. This contrasts with Great Britain, where moles are quite common in fields and gardens. Because Ireland became isolated from the continent before these animals spread, they never managed to colonize the island naturally. The Xbox was the first system with support for high-definition televisions. Microsoft's console, released in 2001, could display some games in high-definition resolutions, such as 720p and 1080i, if the appropriate video cable was used. This was something ahead of its time, when most televisions were still standard definition. There are 6 vehicles and approximately 55 short tons of trash on the moon, left by the Apollo missions. Dirty. Among those objects are lunar modules, tools, cameras, life support backpacks, and even bags with human waste. The astronauts left them there to reduce weight and be able to bring lunar rock samples back to Earth. A farmer in China bought and raised 2 puppies. Worried because they were killing and eating his chickens, he investigated and realized they were bears. They turned out to be Asian black bears, a protected species in the country. He had bought them thinking they were guard dogs, but when they grew and their behavior became more wild, forest authorities intervened and moved the animals to a conservation center. Signals that impressed astronomers for 17 years, which they believed were extraterrestrial, were actually interference from the observatory microwave oven. Every time someone opened the microwave before it finished running, the device emitted a signal that confused the telescope instruments. There is a supercomputer that belonged to the United States Air Force, made from 1,760 PlayStation 3 consoles connected together. The system was used for research tasks such as satellite image processing and complex data analysis, taking advantage of the powerful cell processor of the console. The concept of rap battles has existed since the 5th century, when poets held events where they insulted each other in verse. The Norse god Loki is known for having insulted other gods in verse form. In Norse mythology, there is a story called Lokasenna, where Loki mocks and accuses several gods during a banquet, something very similar to a verbal duel. Human saliva contains a painkiller called opioorphin that is 6 times more powerful than morphine. This molecule was identified by researchers in the 21st century and works by inhibiting the breakdown of natural substances that reduce pain in the body. Although it is present in very small quantities, its discovery has sparked interest in developing new painkillers inspired by natural compounds. The creators of the site The Pirate Bay once tried to buy their own island to create a country where copyright laws would not exist. The idea was to establish a kind of digital micronation where they could host servers without legal restrictions related to file distribution. They even discussed proposals to install independent data centers and communication systems, although the project never went beyond the idea stage. Due to the ban on Japanese imports to Korea after the Second World War, the Nintendo 64 was distributed in that country by Hyundai and was called Comboy 64. For several years, Nintendo used Hyundai as a local partner to sell its consoles in South Korea under different names, a strategy necessary to comply with the trade restrictions that existed at the time. A new species of owl is discovered approximately every 10 years. Many of these species are found in tropical regions or in little explored mountainous areas. Sometimes they are identified by differences in their song, their plumage, or through genetic studies that reveal that they were actually a different species. In 2002, artists turned telephone booths in Osaka, Japan into aquariums. Each booth was filled with water, fish, and decorations, transforming them into small artistic installations. The project sought to give new life to urban objects that were becoming obsolete with the popularization of mobile phones. When Space Invaders was released in arcades in Japan, it was so popular that it caused a shortage of 100 yen coins throughout the country. Players formed long lines to use the machines, and many venues had to install more cabinets to meet the enormous demand the game created. The Chupa Chups logo was designed by Salvador Dali. The famous Spanish surrealist artist created it in 1969, at the request of the founder of the brand, Enrique Bernat. Dali drew the daisy shape in a single session and suggested placing the logo on the top of the candy so it would always be visible. The Central Intelligence Agency reads more than 5 million tweets a day. Part of its work consists of analyzing public information on the internet to detect trends, events, and possible threats. This type of social media monitoring has become a common tool for modern intelligence agencies. Assassin's Creed began development as a Prince of Persia game called Prince of Persia: Assassin, but they preferred to turn it into an original game. The developers wanted a protagonist who acted independently instead of protecting a prince, which led Ubisoft to create a new franchise set in historical conflicts. Life has existed on the planet Earth for 80% of the time since it formed, and has been present practically since the moment the temperature stabilized. The oldest fossil evidence of microorganisms is more than 3,500,000,000 years old, which suggests that life appeared relatively quickly after the surface of the planet cooled enough. When anesthesia was invented in the 1840s, many people criticized it. They considered it an unnecessary luxury. How brave. Some doctors and religious leaders even believed that pain during surgery was natural or morally correct. Over time, successful operations without suffering demonstrated its enormous value, and anesthesia became a standard practice. The names Toyota and Honda derive from Japanese words used to classify different types of rice fields. Honda can be interpreted as original rice field, while Toyota emerged as an adaptation of the surname Toyota, also associated with agricultural land. Both names reflect family and cultural roots that existed long before the companies became giants of the automotive industry. When Zelda Ocarina of Time was re-released for the 3DS, Nintendo deliberately did not fix some errors, so the experience would be as similar as possible to the original version. Some small glitches and curious behaviors were kept because they were already part of the memory and experience of players who knew the game from the Nintendo 64 version. People who speak more than two languages tend to change personality when they change language. Psychological studies have shown that language can influence the way someone expresses themselves, their sense of humor, or even the way they describe emotions. This happens because each language is associated with different cultural contexts and experiences. In 1917, John D. Rockefeller could have paid the entire public debt of the United States by himself. Today, the entire fortune of the richest man in the world would only cover 2 months of interest. At that time, the federal debt was relatively small compared with the modern economy, while Rockefeller accumulated an enormous fortune thanks to the oil empire of Standard Oil. Today, government debt figures are so massive that they far exceed any individual fortune. The game Doom was the most installed program in 1995, surpassing even the Windows 95 operating system. Its shareware distribution model allowed millions of people to copy and share it easily, which helped the game spread through universities, offices, and personal computers around the world. Loch Ness is deep and long enough to contain the entire world population 10 times. Very tightly packed, but we would fit. This Scottish lake reaches more than approximately 656 feet in depth and contains more fresh water than all the lakes and rivers in England and Wales combined, which explains why its enormous volume has fueled stories and legends for decades about the famous Loch Ness Monster. As soon as tiger sharks grow their teeth, they begin attacking and eating each other inside their mother's womb. This phenomenon is known as intrauterine cannibalism and also occurs in other shark species. The strongest embryos devour the weaker ones, which means that only a few survive before birth. Tomb Raider Legend begins without an introduction scene because the developers forgot to make one. During development, it was decided to start the game directly with the action to maintain a faster pace, although many players thought it was a mistake or a missing scene. The difference between terror and horror is that terror occurs in anticipation of the experience of horror. Horror is when the pretty girl runs to escape the killer and save her life. In narrative terms, terror builds tension and expectation, while horror appears when the thing that causes fear is finally shown or confronted. Elizabeth, the widow of Sir Walter Raleigh, kept the decapitated head of her husband with her in a velvet bag for 29 years. Raleigh was executed in 1618 by order of King James I. According to historical accounts, his wife kept the embalmed head as a memento until her own death. China banned time travel on television because authorities say it is a sign of disrespect toward history. Officials considered that many series altered historical events in fantastical ways or portrayed real figures in a frivolous manner. At the beginning of the 2010s, regulations were issued to limit this type of storyline on state television. IMAX projectors weigh the same as a hippopotamus. Their bulbs cost $5 million each and are bright enough to be seen from the International Space Station. These machines use enormous optical systems to project extremely sharp images onto giant screens, which allows films to be shown with a level of detail far superior to that of traditional movie theaters. In Super Smash Bros. Melee, the trophy of Princess Daisy had a mysterious eye behind her head. This gave rise to all kinds of macabre theories. In reality, it is a small error in the three-dimensional model of the trophy, something many players discovered when observing the object from unusual angles. Clint Eastwood is a certified pilot. Sometimes he arrives at film studios by helicopter to avoid traffic. The actor and director has been an aviation enthusiast for decades and has flown different types of aircraft. He also holds a license to fly fixed-wing airplanes, something he has mentioned in several interviews. Durham University in Great Britain offers a Harry Potter course that includes the topic Gryffindor and Slytherin, Prejudice and Intolerance in the Classroom. The course analyzes the books of the saga as a way of studying social themes such as discrimination, identity, and the construction of stereotypes. It also compares these elements with historical conflicts and contemporary debates about diversity and inequality. It is still possible to distinguish between East Germany and West Germany from space. This is because different types of street lamps were used. After reunification, many areas of the former East kept lighting with different tones for years, creating a visible contrast in nighttime photographs taken by satellites. In the classic Nintendo game Punch-Out!, the Russian fighter Soda Popinski was originally called Vodka Drunkinsky, but the name was changed to avoid controversy. The change happened when the game was adapted for Nintendo home consoles, since the original name made a direct reference to alcohol and to stereotypes about Russians. There are around 1,200 species of bats in the world, and none of them are blind. In fact, most have good vision in addition to using echolocation to navigate in the dark. Bats represent nearly 1/5 of all mammal species on the planet and play a key role in pollination and insect control. Human touch can detect something as small as approximately 0.5 millionths of an inch, so do not worry. Neuroscience studies have shown that the fingertips are extremely sensitive to microscopic irregularities on surfaces. Under controlled conditions, people can perceive incredibly small differences when sliding a finger, demonstrating the extraordinary precision of the human nervous system. Uranium is 40 times more common than silver and 500 times more common than gold. Although it is usually associated with rare and dangerous materials, it is actually relatively abundant in the Earth's crust. It is found in small concentrations in rocks, soils, and even in seawater. In the early stages of development of Half-Life 2, it was planned that there would be a friendly alien that would follow Gordon Freeman and eat the bodies of the enemies he killed. But it was abandoned because it would be complicated to program. Half-Life 3 confirmed. In the world, 4,000 McDonald's hamburgers are eaten every minute, the same number that can be made from one average cow. The chain sells tens of millions of hamburgers every day in thousands of restaurants around the planet, which makes it one of the largest and most influential fast food companies in the world.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe so you don't miss more interesting content. Leave your comments and click on any of these videos. See you next time.